I noticed right when I got home that some major happenings are afoot in the gaming sphere. Hideki Kamiya of Platinum Games is leaving the company. And this is a really interesting development, something that I'm honestly not really sure what to think of. I mean, I guess I have an opinion. I guess I have a hot take. I guess I have an idea on how I feel about this. But when all is said and done, like Hideki Kamiya has had a great career, a 15-year like period at Platinum, longer at a couple of years longer than that at Capcom. He's headed up some of the most critically acclaimed games ever made. This guy is an industry legend. Regardless of like what's been happening over the past 10 years, you can't really take that away from him. In a lot of ways, I still have a lot of respect for his accomplishments, his legacy, the things he's put out. And being heavily involved in making Platinum as good as it was in its heyday. But that's kind of the caveat to this, isn't it? In its heyday. Because Platinum Games, over the past decade, has essentially broken down and become a shell of its former self. It's not something that people actively talk about. It's not something that's like making the news cycle every time, but there can be no denying that Platinum, which used to be a fan favorite game development studio that made some of the best action games in existence, has fallen out of favor in favor of FromSlop and like Team Ninja Neo clones, right? like Dark Souls clones, right? Like their brand of action games has kind of fallen by the wayside because over the past decade they have failed to really capitalize on the audience. Like 10 years ago, I would have told you that like Platinum Games had the potential to become one of the best Nintendo subsidiaries there was, right? With their focus on making in crazy action based gameplays. And to a certain extent, that was true. We got like the Wonderful 101, which is one of the best action games ever made, and my personal favorite game on Wii U. We got like Star Fox Zero, which is wonderful, Astral Chain, Bayonetta 3, Cereza and the Lost Demon this year. Like, there's been plenty of great stuff coming from Platinum lately. But more and more, it feels as if it's like a flash in the pan success, right? There have been too many blunders, too many ridiculous business decisions, too many controversies to really take this company seriously. I myself, one of the angriest, one of the most angry I've ever been on this channel was when they announced that the Wonderful 101 would be coming to other consoles via a Kickstarter, right? I thought that was a ludicrous concept. It made no sense. Nintendo had come forward and said they would port the game on Nintendo Switch. There was no reason to do this. But Platinum naively believed there was this huge untapped market on multi-plat consoles, and so they put the game out on PlayStation, on Xbox, on PC, and it basically bombed worse than it did the first time because non-gamers don't like games like this, right? This is the reality that Platinum Games has struggled with, is that their brand of action games is so esoteric and so hardcore that like the vast majority of the audience cannot really understand or appreciate them, and no game really emphasizes that aspect of their game design philosophy than the Wonderful 101, right? Like the Kickstarter was a terrible idea and really only became as successful as it was because of Platinum's still like a lingering legacy and because people honestly believe this would lead to like other Nintendo games becoming multi-plat, right? Right? Like it wasn't about the game itself, right? And like seeing what they've done since then, like seeing like the Platinum 5, games like Soul Crest that come out, which looks like which I never even bothered playing. Games like Project GG, like it looks like Project GG. Project GG was vaporware, right? Nobody was excited about that game. And the fact that Hideki Kamiya is leaving Platinum now essentially confirms that we're never, ever, ever going to see it unless he somehow takes it with him, which and like develops it with another studio, which I 100% guarantee is not going to happen. Like that seems too ridiculous to be true. My guess is that like Hideki Kamiya is done, right? Like he's old, he's busted, he's tired. He was destroyed by the Scalebound development cycle, which never actually came out. Like he's never made a proper recovery from a Scalebound, right? Scalebound was like a major project for the studio that was canceled for unspecified reasons. I would guess like a mixture between like Platinum's in Platinum's like internal problems and Microsoft's incompetency, right? Right, like Scalebound is like the reason that I hate Microsoft as much as I do. But it needs to be said that in a lot of ways that like Microsoft is not entirely at fault, right? Platinum does have a ton of issues, right? They've been there since the beginning. You can find old interviews from like Anaba and like Kamiya and those guys talking about like what a nightmare the original Bayonetta was to develop because like the team was like working on new hardware. You had like the PS3 version like bogging everything down. You had like development issues, like controversies with Sega, like and like it was just this really intense hardcore action game that like the team in a lot of ways was not prepared to tackle, right? Like as good as that game ended up being, one of the best ever made, like it doesn't change the fact that like a lot of people got burned out. And that has been an interesting trend we've been seeing with Platinum. It's actually one of the least popular developers to work for in Japan. Like Platinum is becoming notorious for being like a kind of a sinking ship for developers, right? Like we're always seeing news of like major notable people like jump ship to other companies. I can't remember the last time this has happened, but it's been a trend for a long time. Like they're always losing talent to the point where like it was kind of obvious for those of us who are paying attention that there were like severe underlying issues at the company. And now that Kamiya himself is joining them, it remains like it's safe to say that Platinum is like a sinking ship. And Kamiya is one of the rats sinking that fleeing ship. Kamiya was, I suppose. Well, I guess he still is because he hasn't left his position yet. But he is right now one of the higher ups at Platinum. He was the guy making all the business decisions. He was like heavily involved in like the creative process. He was like producing all of this stuff. Like he was behind Soul Cresta and like those garbage decisions. He was involved with like the self-publishing scheme and like trying to produce gacha games for China. Like there were all sorts of questionable decisions on his part. And I've always said this, like if Platinum wanted to be successful, if they wanted to put out good, high-profile games, all they had to do was sign an exclusivity contract with Nintendo, or alternatively be bought out by them. Like it wasn't necessary because like plenty of studios have a good working relationship with Nintendo without being outright owned by them. HAL, Intelligent Systems, uh, Game Freak, I think, isn't technically owned by Nintendo fully. Like, you have these great studios that put out like these fantastic games that have this good working partnership with Nintendo that like retain some amount of autonomy and like some amount of control of their creative properties. So like Platinum to me seems like they had a lot of raw talent when it came to its development studios, right? It had like great creative talent, but it fumbled at the business aspect. And that is something I think a lot of people don't really think about is that like this is a business. Like it isn't enough to put out great games like Star Fox Zero. You have to get people to want to buy it, right? You have to get people to understand the game's value and its appeal and like get the audience like excited for it. And Platinum consistently failed at this over and over and over and over again. It is so strange. Like Bayonetta 3 is a really good example. Like, stellar game, right? Really, really good. On par with the original, a big upgrade from 2. Why is it like so unpopular online? Right? It's the Nintendo exclusivity. It's the visual quality. It's the development cycle was too long, right? There are all these like real issues that kind of held Bayonetta 3 back from being like a much bigger hit than it ended up being, right? And like a lot of that is because of Platinum's poor management. Like why exactly did they think it was a good idea to make Bayonetta like have these big open environments and these big like scale bound style like the combat and like just no, like just do what you did with the original again. Come up with a demon summon mechanic if you want, but like a lot of the problems with Bayonetta 3 amount to the fact that like the level layouts are way bigger than necessary, right? Like I much prefer the tight, like well designed, gorgeous, unique settings in 1 and 2. Like 3 just has this weird like garish kind of like uh I don't know. Like I love 3, but like there's definitely this weird weird aspect to it where like the visual quality is not where it's is not up to snuff. And I know a lot of people like to blame the Switch hardware, but like just look at Tears of the Kingdom, just look at like Xenoblade Chronicles. They do so much more with the hardware. And three just can't compete with those games, right? Like it's becoming more and more of a trend for these like third party Japanese games on Switch to like have these really ugly character models, right? Like they really seem to put their best foot forward on other platforms. And I think this is a really good example of that, right? There's no reason to think that like Bayonetta 3 couldn't have like had more attractive characters, but like again, there were issues, right, with Bayonetta 3, right? And a lot of people like to blame Nintendo. Well, nobody blames Nintendo for this. But like a lot of people like to speculate on this and talk about this, but like what it all amounts to really is that like there was a lot more negative discussion around Bayonetta 3 than was actually necessary, right? Like they didn't show the game off in a timely manner, they didn't release it in a timely manner, they announced it way too soon, and like the product that delivered for a lot of people was underwhelming. Now, I would disagree that it was underwhelming. You know, it was like one of my favorite games of last year, but like there can be no denying that the project was mismanaged to a certain extent, you know, regardless of like the final result. And I think that specific thing can be felt in like all of Platinum's projects, right? It's a problem with Metal Gear Solid, Metal Gear Rising. It's a problem with Mad World. It's a problem with Bayonetta 1, 2, The Wonderful 101. Like, why? Like, they have a problem running the business. They have a problem making these games, like, appealing to their audience. They are so esoteric and so strange that they just don't have any appeal to general audiences at all, no matter how well produced and engaging the gameplay is. Like, and I think Kamiya, in a lot of ways, is the one responsible for this, right? You kind of have like this very specific trend of like the games he works on being like unappealing to people for various reasons. The art style in Beautiful Joe, right? The weird controls of the Wonderful 101. The Space Harrier section in Bayonetta 1. Plenty of people will like point to those instances, like those things, as being reasons why they hate the games. And I would argue against that, right? Because I love those games, but like there is this very surface level like appeal that you need to give to these low level gamers to get them to be invested in your games. Like it's not enough to just have good gameplay for these people. Like you have to give them like a reason to be excited about it, right? Like you have to like make your game look cool and like interesting and like engaging and like the next big thing. And in a lot of ways Platinum just failed to do that. And Kamiya, I think, has gotten a reputation over the past decade for being more well known for like blocking people on Twitter and being like angry all the time than actually producing games. Like that has been the shift over the past 10 years. We went from a guy who headed up like classic projects like Okami, Resident Evil 2, and a Devil May Cry to this guy who just blocks people on Twitter and gets mad at people for really no reason. I myself was like offended by some of the things he said to me. He blocked me once, I believe. At the very least, he shit on me, right? I wasn't impressed by that. You don't attack your fans, right? And I suppose like that kind of behavior, that kind of attitude really alienated him to a lot of people, right? I know we like to joke about it, like blocked and stuff like that, but like I think general audiences, people who just casually know this guy, they have a very, very, very poor image of him. And honestly, in a lot of ways, he deserves it, right? Like even now, like thinking back on his legacy, like I I feel almost as if like maybe this guy leaving Platinum might be an improvement for the company, right? At the very least, it'll allow other talent to surface, other people to be put forward, other directors, and maybe some of these boneheaded business decisions will just stop. Maybe we'll have to see. Like, we'll have to see just how involved he was with like some of the worst decisions at Platinum. But at the very least, like we're not gonna see anything like Soul Cresta again, right? Like the Platinum 5 announcement is like one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. Like they spent months hyping up these five major announcements, and what do? They announce a new building. They announce a wonderful one-on-one Kickstarter. They announce like Project GG. I don't remember what the fourth thing was, but like the fifth thing was like Soul Cresta. Like, are you serious? Like, really? That's what you like finish off your great announcement with? Like some budget like overpriced smup? Like that was appalling. It really was weird seeing them like put this out there, having people like get hyped for like major platinum keynote and then essentially get nothing of value, right? Because the Wonderful 101 is worse on remastered is worse on other platforms than it is on Wii U, right? It's an inferior version of the game. Project GG has never surfaced, right? Soul Cresta was underwhelming to begin with. Like they announced absolutely nothing in that presentation. It's so weird. It's so weird looking back at it, but the last major thing they've done, well, I mean, Bayonetta 3 was moderately successful. Cereza and the Lost Demon was moderately successful, right? But like these are flash in the pan successes. Like these are minor minor releases that did relatively well for what they were in like a sea of like some of the straight up like biggest piles of garbage we've ever seen in our lives, right? Games like Babylon's Fall are like, absolute jokes among like the community, right? Like they're putting out some of the worst games of the generation. And like and like nobody nobody's really people like as much as people like Bayonetta 3, as much as I like Bayonetta 3, as much as I like Series and the Lost Demon, like I never once for a second thought these games would like fix all of Platinum's problems. Like I no longer believe that Nintendo can just acquire Platinum and have them produce like high quality action game franchises. I think the best thing forward is for Nintendo to just use their plant. That guy from Nintendo over Europe that was like hired on there at Platinum a while back. Use their plant to just like pick out the talent, the people who actually work there, who are actually skilled, who actually do stuff, and then just poach them from like other development studios like at Nintendo, right? And I think that's what Nintendo is trying to do, like because I think an outright acquisition is impractical at this point because the company like must be laden with problems. Like the company is effectively worthless. Like it has nothing of value, right? Like they don't own any of their IPs. Like uh the developers are just gonna leave. Like what value would buying the platinum game just give you? Like essentially nothing, right? So I have to wonder like what Kamiya's mindset is by leaving, and I do think in a lot of ways he sees the writing on the wall. He understands that it's a sinking ship. He understands that like he's not going to be able to keep doing what he's been doing for whatever reason. Like we're going to have to like wait and see like uh what this results in later down the line, but right now I think it's safe to say that we might not see Hideki Kamiya again. He might go the way of Keiji Unifune or Yuji Naka and just become like a shell of their former selves, right? Like he might just become a has-been or has been a has-been for the past 10 years. Like, it's it's disappointing. I love the Wonderful 101. Like it was one of my favorite games on Wii U. Like I was really looking forward to seeing what he put out next, but unfortunately, it seems like this might be the end, but at the very least, we got a lot of classic games, and I do very much appreciate this man and all he's done for gaming.